In the United States, more and more people are embracing the ideas of socialism. These people advocate for a big government that can provide lots of social welfare programs for its citizens. In this video, I want to give a clear and simple explanation of why socialism does not work and why the alternative of free markets is a better approach. Over the years, America has become more and more socialist. Every year, the government gets bigger and bigger. If this progression continues, at some point, the government will become so big that they will just take over everything. If this happens, socialism will progress to the next step and become communism, where the government has complete control. They own everything, they run everything. When the government gets so big, if a bad person gets into politics, it's not that difficult for them to seize power and become a communist dictator. The leader just starts suspending people's rights and ordering people to do what the government says. Since the government is already in every aspect of your lives, it's hard to stop them. You can see this clearly because there are a lot of people right now advocating for more government control. Specifically, a lot of young people think that America should try communism. People don't understand what a huge movement this has become. There's a group called the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, and they do a poll every year on the attitudes about communism. In the latest poll from 2020, they found that 40% of Americans have a favorable view of socialism. What is really shocking is the attitudes of young people. Gen Z's favorability of socialism is at 49%, up from 40% a year ago. 49%? That's almost half the group. An increase of almost 10% in 1 year. I think that part of the problem is there's not enough people explaining why socialism is so bad. So I want to give you a really simple, straightforward explanation of why socialism does not work. I call this the toy dilemma. Do you remember when you were young and you wanted to buy a new toy? Maybe it was a video game, a Lego set, a Barbie doll, whatever it was. How did you get it? You had to ask your parents. You either got an allowance or you had to ask them for money, and then you could go to the store and buy it. But you could not just buy anything. You could only buy the things that your parents approved of. Even if you wanted to buy some violent video game, you could not buy it if your parents did not want you to play the game. That's the general process you would go through if you wanted to buy a toy as a kid. Now contrast that with what it's like to buy something as an adult. As an adult, you can buy whatever you want. You have your own money. You don't have to get your parents' approval. It's great to be an adult. You have freedom. It's pretty easy to see how life as an adult is better. You don't want to stay a child forever. You want the freedom to buy what you want. This is the difference between socialism and free markets. Socialism is like having an overbearing parent. The government's always looking over your shoulder, telling you what you can and cannot buy. With free markets, you can do what you want. Now, could you live under socialism? Sure, but why would you want to? Freedom is so much better. The problem with this example is that in the case of your parents, they at least care for you. Politicians do not. Politicians have their own agenda, and your best interest is not part of it. If you want to see this in a real-world example, just look at car sales. What toy do you buy as an adult? A car. But big government is sticking its tentacles into every aspect of the car industry. Even though it's your money, you can't just buy whatever you want. California just announced that they are banning all new gas car sales by 2035. So if you don't want to buy a crummy electric car, tough. You're going to be forced to, or you're not going to be allowed to drive. It doesn't matter if it's useful to you or not. What about people who live out in the country and there's no charging stations? No, it doesn't matter. What if you need a diesel engine in your truck to be able to haul more weight? No, it does not matter. You're going to be forced to buy something that you cannot use. This is the toy dilemma. People don't want big government telling them what they can and cannot buy. Why can't we just allow people to buy what they want? If they want an electric car, they can buy it. If they want a gas car, they can buy that. I know people will argue that climate change is so serious that people should be forced to buy electric vehicles. But you have to ask yourself, is climate change the real reason the government is pushing this on you? Or do they have their own agenda? Do they really have your best interest at heart here? Or is it the fact that the current president's son was involved in purchasing a cobalt mine in the Congo with China, and cobalt is used to build batteries for electric vehicles, and the president's family is going to make hundreds of millions of dollars from forcing you to buy electric vehicles? So is it really climate change, or is it simply government corruption? Whatever it is, I think that people should have the freedom to decide for themselves what they do with their own money. Now, we have to admit that even with all these problems, for some people, socialism is still more attractive. To use an example, maybe you have health problems and you cannot work. Government handouts sound attractive because you can't earn the money on your own. I think it's important to recognize that some people need a helping hand. The people who benefit the most under socialism are the people who cannot earn enough on their own. So to make things fair, socialism pulls everyone down to their level. You take money from someone and use redistribution to give it to someone else. It's a zero-sum game. However, capitalism is not the opposite because economics is not a zero-sum game. Everyone's life gets better as the economy expands. Capitalism does not have to leave anyone behind. I believe it is possible to have compassionate capitalism. We can inspire people to pull themselves up into financial freedom so that they do not have to rely on the government. In contrast, you have socialism, which takes the most productive people in your society and pulls them down to the level of the least productive. It does not take much thought to realize which approach will have the better outcome. In fact, we have many great examples of this throughout history. Just look at North and South Korea. North and South Korea separated in 1945. The North was communist and the South was capitalist. We can obviously see the result. When you look at the countries from space, there are no lights on in North Korea. North Korea started out as a democracy just like America. Then the communists promised free education, free healthcare, and that the government would take care of everybody. But we can see the result: death, destruction, and starvation. They also lost their freedom. Just like my example, they decided to let the government act like a parent, and they lost the ability to buy whatever they wanted. They don't even have that choice anymore. If you want an example that is more close to home, let's look at the southwestern United States. There are two states right next to each other that have developed very differently: Arizona and New Mexico. In the 1940s, both these states were very similar. Similar populations, similar natural resources, similar economies. In the 1940s, the federal government started pumping massive amounts of money into New Mexico. They built research labs, and that is where the US developed the atomic bomb. Now, with all this government investment in New Mexico, you would have thought that its economy would have outpaced Arizona. But the opposite happened. Arizona grew into a thriving economy. What was the difference? Arizona was more capitalist, while New Mexico was more socialist. New Mexico would always choose big government solutions, while Arizona would give businesses more freedom. For example, in New Mexico, the government is the largest employer by far, while Arizona has a diverse mix of large employers. Just looking at GDP, in 2022, New Mexico had $94.66 billion of GDP, while Arizona had $356.42 billion of GDP, almost 4 times the size. So this is a really interesting case study in the US of the results of socialism. Now, I know there are people in the comments who will accuse me of being overdramatic. They will claim that socialism does not necessarily turn into a tyrannical dictatorship under communism. They will argue that America is just a little socialist. They claim that I should not put so much emphasis on the trends and that we are still mostly capitalist. Really? Let me just contradict some of those statements. The government is in every aspect of our lives. They monitor our communications. They have a no-fly list to determine who can travel. They coordinate with social media companies to control your freedom of speech. They are using the FBI to attack parents who speak out at school board meetings. You have to get a license to drive a car or operate a business. You need a government certificate to be a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant. You need a license from the government to get married. If the government does not approve of how you are raising your kids, they can take your kids away. The government is embedded in every aspect of our lives. And if there is a crooked person in charge, they can use all these methods to get you. If they want to cancel you, they can just turn you off. Why are you arguing with me that we are living under an oppressive big government? Because that's how I see it. Let me explain how you can see right now that you are living under the control of big government in America. Take a look around you at whatever city you live in. What are the nicest, newest buildings in your town? In a lot of cities in America, the nicest buildings are government offices. This is a phenomenon that I've noticed over the last 15 years. When you walk into City Hall in some of these small towns, it's almost like a palace. The buildings are so nice. Meanwhile, when you look around at local businesses, the buildings look run down. Businesses are struggling while the government is operating out of these magnificent new buildings. It should be the opposite. Your government should be operating out of the crummiest buildings in your town. Your businesses should be in the nicest buildings. Why is it the opposite? We are punishing the most productive people in the economy to support a growing socialist government. Let me give you another example. How many of you have heard an acronym called DEI? It stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Most large organizations in the US have an Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and the purpose is to address social justice issues. So what is DEI? We know what diversity and inclusion are. Most people agree those are good things. What is equity? Think about that. What does equity really mean? In DEI workshops, they often show this image to teach equity. It means equal outcomes. The idea is that some people are born with advantages, and we need to even the playing field. On a surface level, that sounds like a good thing. But when you really think about it, it's pretty sinister. Who gets to decide what is equitable? The government bureaucrat? The crooked government bureaucrat who is taking bribes? That's who's deciding what is equitable? DEI claims that someone is going to go around and decide who's an oppressor and who is being oppressed. And then this person is going to allegedly fix the imbalance. How are they going to do this? They're going to do it by force. They're going to direct opportunities to the people they deem worthy. It gives them authority to take away your resources and give it to themselves if they feel like you're better off than them. Equity is communism. DEI is saying that diversity and inclusion are the problem and that communism is the solution. It's like a communism sandwich. It's taking two things that people want to address and hiding communism as a secret method in the middle. Then people are eating this communism sandwich and they don't even know what they're eating. They're thinking, oh yum, this communism tastes really good. When in fact, it is a poison pill. What you do not realize is that DEI is a communist takeover, and it is already embedded in every major institution in the United States. If you think that I'm wrong, go to anyone who works in DEI and ask them this question. You know, I'm not sure about this equity stuff. I get diversity, I get inclusion, but can we take equity out of the name? If you ask any of these people that question, they will lose their mind. They'll probably call you a racist, but there's nothing racist about it. It's communism. It is their method of forcing their agenda on you, whether you want it or not. What everyone needs to realize is that this has been tried before in a very similar way. Do you know about someone named Pol Pot? He became a communist dictator in Cambodia in the 1970s. He abolished money and demanded that everyone was equal, even to the point that everyone was forced to wear the same black clothing. How's that for equity? But it did not stop there. Pol Pot did not think it was fair for rich people to live in cities while poor people worked on farms. He forced everyone to leave the cities at gunpoint and go march into the rural areas and live and work on the farms. There were no more lawyers, no more bankers, and everyone was equal and working the farms. How's that for equity? Of course, people protested, but anyone who spoke out against the government was killed. Approximately a quarter of the population was killed, between 1.5 and 2 million people. How is that for equity? Our country is at a turning point. You can move towards socialism, or we can embrace free markets. The choice is up to you. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think that socialism is a good thing? Let me know in the comments down below. Now, I do have some frustrating news. My live stream last Wednesday was demonetized, like a lot of my videos have been lately. Let me tell you this. I intend to continue to speak out about important issues, even if it's on topics that the government does not want you to hear about. If you find my videos helpful, please consider supporting the channel through a membership. You can sign up for $6 a month on my website, wolvesandfinance.com, and it helps me survive the shadow bans and demonetization. I want to give a big thank you to all my members. I really appreciate it. I'm Zach from Wolves and Finance. Thank you for watching.